co-founder of Decommerce, and I'm bringing you the inside scoop of everything brands, community, innovation, and Web3 through conversations like the one we're just about to have with global leaders from brands, media, nonprofits who share what their experiences are and how they think community matters. So today, I'm super excited to have Carol Hilsum here. She's the founder of StudioThree, and we met through FARFETCH a while ago by now, and I'm really excited to having this conversation. Hi, Carol.
Hello.
I'd love for you to introduce yourself.
Perfect. Well, it's great to be here, and I'm really excited about this conversation. I am Carol Hilsum, and my background is a long tenure, really, within the fashion industry, starting with Topshop in the late 90s and early noughties, working with them in retail and then within brand marketing and digital, and doing lots and lots of fun work there, really very much driven by the community, both in terms of the creative industries at that time and also the customers that loved that brand and were really at the center of how we built the growth and the whole brand experience around them. And then I worked at Net-a-Porter, which was really spearheading e-commerce in luxury. Hard to remember, but it was very new at the time to buy luxury online, and actually lots of people didn't think it was really going to work. So joined that team to really prove the point that it was a huge opportunity, and that business grew from around 300 million when I joined to $1 billion. And we reached that North Star that we always wanted to do, to show how substantial the opportunity was with online luxury experience and commerce. And then I joined FARFETCH and was working with them through the IPO story for a couple of years, and then went to lead corporate venture for FARFETCH. And that was really about building up the FARFETCH platform and strategy, but very much through partnership with this amazing innovation startup ecosystem that we have within fashion technology. And part of that was really entrenching ourselves and building a community of great innovators and thinkers around FARFETCH and around what we were trying to do within FARFETCH, and ultimately go on to partner with those companies and build strategies with those companies. And for a few, we acquired them as well. And now, as co-founder of StudioThree, what we do is we work across the startup ecosystem and startup community and help them with growth and investment, but also work on a kind of 360 element of the innovation ecosystem, which includes startups, brands, and investors. And we work with all of those people to think about the right strategies, right thesis, right investments, etc. as well. So really a kind of 360 community on that sense as well.
Wow, such vast experience, and I can't wait to dive deeper into the different experiences and share that. And would love to kick off the conversation with the question, what community means to you?
Absolutely. I think community is now a sense of belonging, of where you can be inspired, where you can be educated, where you can feel connection. And so for me, I feel like it's a sense of positive belonging. And now I think, especially now, it's around give and take as well. It's around supporting the community, but also gaining value from a community that you're connected to as well.
Okay, I already saw how you mentioned the word in your introduction as well quite a few times. So I'd love to go back to, you were really there in the early days of e-commerce. You mentioned how we've kind of forgotten how it didn't used to be a thing because it's gotten so normal on a day-to-day basis. Can we just rewind time a little bit and share with us the very beginnings? What was that like? How did you start with getting into that space?
Absolutely. So my experience was that, as I said, I worked for Topshop. At the time, it was a bricks and mortar business. It was a retail shop business. It had, I think, around 300 stores around just the UK, and it had some franchises internationally. But international expansion was very hard for any kind of business at that time as well. And really, it was a brand which was very much built on the sense that as young girls at that time, they were really just starting to be able to buy fashion and express themselves in different ways, in different fashion, especially out with London, which within the UK was this sort of central hub of creativity, and you could wear what you want, but really across the UK, you definitely couldn't do that kind of thing. So it was this brand that really tapped into a very kind of zeitgeist moment at that time where young girls were being inspired by fashion and wanted to express themselves from a fashion perspective. And they were starting to be able to buy clothes as well in a way that, you know, generations before that didn't. So it was kind of these local hubs. So for me, we had like a small Topshop in my hometown, but you would travel to the Topshop in Glasgow. I'm from Scotland, so sort of small country and small cities, but you would travel to Glasgow to go to the bigger Topshop because that would have a bigger supply of clothing. And so the supply was really constrained and really hard to actually access, despite the brand meant so much to people as well. And people would travel, for example, to London to go to the, you know, what we call the 214, the big Topshop in London to get there. So what was very interesting, as well as being that kind of first generation who were using the internet and understood what the internet could be and were really excited about this access to information, which was kind of the initial experience of the internet, what we could really see was, well, this was going to give everyone the same access. It was going to give almost this kind of choice equality around people. Everyone was going to be able to engage in everything the brand had to offer. And that, from just a value perspective, was so meaningful to us. And so the way that it worked at Topshop, you obviously had, you know, the senior sort of decision makers around investment in this very new area, and they were very cautious about it. They really couldn't foresee that it would be very big. They thought that Topshop.com would be probably the same size as a small to mid store in terms of sales. And so they really kind of thought it would be taking maybe sort of tens of thousands per week in terms of revenue, for example, maybe up to maybe 100,000, but that would be sort of the limit of it all. But I think as the kind of ultimate users of that experience, we saw, no, this is changing everything. This is changing everything for us who love fashion and want to engage in fashion, because suddenly we were going to be able to have access, which we've never been able to have before, if you weren't living right beside, you know, you weren't living in London, basically, from a Topshop perspective. And then, of course, internationally, it meant suddenly you were able to open up this brand, which did have a sort of global footprint, but essentially you would have to go to London to really experience it in some ways. So for me and lots of people around me, I think we could really foresee that this was kind of changing everything in terms of the opportunity and the way that people were going to shop and the way that people were going to be able to immerse themselves in brands and engage with brands and identify with brands as well. And when we launched Topshop.com, it very, very quickly, within 6 months or even less, was taking more than the big London store. So suddenly it became, you know, people realized, oh, this is a whole new distribution. This is a whole new channel. This isn't just like a sort of e-shop, which was called e-shop at the time. It's not just an electronic version of a small store. This is a whole new game, basically.
Wow, and so many things that you spoke about resonate a lot, and I'd love actually to dive deeper into. So you said back then already, you saw, and the people around you saw, how big and how really disruptive this is. But then many, or if not most people outside did not really understand or thought, well, it's going to be, you know, half the store, doesn't really matter. And now if we fast forward to today, I feel that can happen with a lot of innovation too, where even when we have conversations with brands and innovation teams where, let's say, the closer circle, they're like immediately get it, if not ask for it. They're like, yeah, this is going to revolutionize everything. But then how to show this to people that have not seen it? But can you share a bit more in your experience how that has then unfolded?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always really challenging because a lot of it is within innovation. And when you're really seeing sectors change significantly, the big challenge will always be that the businesses in that sector are built to deliver to what the sector is today. And so when you're going in and saying, this is going to change everything, it's almost impossible for them to say, oh, great, okay, well, let's do that. Because it's just not how they're structured. They're structured to do what they do today. way. And really one thing which is kind of frustrating for everyone, I guess, everyone in the ecosystem, is it just takes a long time for that change to happen. Now, I would point out that I think those cycles of change are much smaller and getting much quicker than they previously have been. Now, a good reference point that always made me laugh was Net-a-Porter started in 2000, right? So it's kind of proving the point that you can sell luxury online in 2000, and you have a customer. The big thing was like nobody's going to buy luxury. Maybe they bought cheaper clothes, but they'll never buy luxury clothes. So that kind of absolute basic assumption that people thought then meant failure for any luxury e-commerce was already proven in 2000. Now, I remember reading something probably in about 2017, which said the year of luxury e-commerce coming to fruition is going to be 2018. So it took at least 20 years for luxury e-commerce to become an invested, really believed in strategy within the rest of the luxury industry. 20 years. So it does take a long time to see change. Now, I think things will change a lot faster because people have learned from that, and businesses are naturally realizing they have to be more agile and developing, etc. And actually just the consumer behavior that drives that change is becoming far more obvious and far more difficult to ignore, definitely. So I think the reality is when you're pitching companies and saying everything's changing and look at community and look how community has the power and how it's driving this, the reality of your brand perception and your demand and your sales, etc. I think what I would suggest is that's probably no. It's just actually the changing of the kind of the beast of the corporate is very difficult to envisage and to see. So I think it's all about figuring out how best to test small and to showcase the opportunity in those ways. So then probably the hearts and minds are already there and they already realize that, but then it has some level of evidence and opportunity to be able to start building the change that you need to happen within a business as well.
Let's talk a bit about even the innovation managers, innovation directors, everybody who's, let's say, sees it, sees where the future can go and believe in a certain direction. If you had advice to your past self how to make this happen either quicker or just in a better way, let's say from today's point of view, what would that be?
I think what's great now, it's not so much that there's the potential for it to happen. I think now it's the reality, especially within just talking about the fashion sector, for example. I think there's a huge amount of evidence to show the world's already changed. And actually what's going to be really important is how do you, within your business, ride the wave that's already there. It's not a future, it's not a 5-year plan, it's not a 10-year plan. And that can be really challenging because businesses really feel a lot of comfort in doing 5 and 10-year plans because ultimately they're just doing a presentation and they can kind of feel happy that they've written the presentation. But the reality is, what I would say is to make sure that you're showcasing the fact that things have already changed and you can see that they've already changed. And so you build up a huge amount of data in terms of external what's happening. And what often, it's very, very challenging to run fashion businesses. It's like one of the hardest businesses to run. It looks really fun, but it's really, really challenging to run any kind of business in the fashion sector and beauty sector and lifestyle sector. Is very challenging. And so you have to work on the day-to-day so much and you become kind of obsessed with your internal day-to-day scenario because you have to be, because it's all consuming. I think what innovation directors or innovation companies can show is give them a moment to show actually this is what's happening externally. And this is we're seeing in terms of innovation. This is how we're seeing people react to that innovation. This is how we're seeing different sectors deal with the innovation. Very connected sectors like music, sports, etc., where case studies translate really easily into fashion as well. And I think that's important to be able to be that voice from an external lens to showcase this is not just what's about to happen, but what is already happening. And then therefore being able to show and here are opportunities for us from a strategic perspective to be able to start testing the water of what this means.
Well, that's super interesting. So really showing what's already happening.
Yeah.
And exactly. Not just, like you said, just slides of what could be potentially the case in 10 years' time. It's really tangible.
100%. I think it can be easily missed what's going on, even within your own sector. If you can showcase this is what some of the more sort of leaders in terms of what they're doing are doing, but also I think other sectors is really good as well, because I think it will be a sort of same but different scenario, right? Sectors just look at things slightly differently and they have different limitations. So sometimes they've been able to take opportunities much easier than other sectors might not be able to. But certainly what's going on in music, which has already obviously gone through the kind of complete, extensive digital transformation, but even sports, which are very interesting, and especially within community, about sport community is obviously fundamental to sport and what they are doing in terms of Web3 and loyalty and building new revenue streams for their community, etc. I think super interesting within this particular lens. I think what's great to be able to show, I find, within innovation is an evidence-based approach, because lots of people will go into, here's an idea and let's talk a lot about ideas and let's talk a lot about sort of workshop of ideas, etc. And the reality for businesses now, if you do have the opportunity, and some teams have different remits and have different responsibilities, but if you do have the opportunity to, I think what's really great from an innovative strategy perspective is make it far more based on the reality, data-driven, etc. Because I think you have the opportunity to do that. So if you can, you should.
Hands-on numbers and examples.
Exactly.
Makes a lot of sense. And when we think more in terms of the sense of belonging that you spoke about earlier, I think that's a beautiful way to put it, what community is about. When we think of belonging, you having seen into so many also very large organizations that might use the word community as well, how do you see the sense of belonging playing part in their day-to-day, in their businesses, maybe even in the past, today, and where do you see it going as well?
Absolutely. I think it's very difficult for brands, certainly that have been around from maybe before content creation and social media, where brand was really all about aspiration. It was very protected. You had to be so careful with your brand. You were obviously so careful with your brand aesthetic. You were so careful where your brand was seen and the conversation around your brand, etc. And you could be incredibly protective over your brand. So our Topshop marketing, for example, at that time, one of the cornerstones of Topshop marketing was a biannual page in Vogue. That was our kind of big marketing moments. And then we did lots of community and experiential marketing at the time as well. We did things like student shops and music sponsorship, etc. But a lot of that was quite protected because you didn't have social media, etc. So the experience was very localized and it didn't become really part of your overarching brand. Brand discussion could still be very protected by the advertising that you did, the new gen sponsorship, etc. as well. So you had this kind of two-tiered approach. So you did have a lot of community, but it didn't really trickle into the overall brand perception, if that makes sense, because there just wasn't really any public awareness of student shops and what they were doing unless you went to the student shop. And now where brands had this idea of like aspiration, and that was really important, obviously now it's completely different because the brand can't really control the conversation around the brand, and it has to also be very different. It has to have an authenticity, it has to have a depth, it has to have much clearer personality through it as well, which in some parts is a really exciting creative challenge, but in other parts is kind of rewriting all of the rules that we've had around community and brand protection as well. So it does take a whole load of new thinking around it. And I think that is particularly hard for brands that have been built before this time and are now trying to transition and relearn the rule book, really, of how do you create this brand and how do you have then this connection to the community and this level of authenticity, etc. as well. I think it's a very different way of doing anything, really. And I think what's also really makes it challenging is the brands that are still thinking about this just being a marketing strategy are the ones that are finding it really challenging, because unless this is a whole brand strategy, it doesn't really work. And the people now, the shoppers and the next generations of shoppers can see through that very, very clearly. If you're just running community as marketing, you have to have it really entrenched in your whole experience and your whole brand strategy as well. Again, a substantial shift in thinking and skill sets that's needed to do that.
And when you talk about those challenges, can you shed a bit more light into what does that look like inside of those organizations? Like, where does that discussion happen? What is the type of discussion that happens on those topics?
Well, I think that's the important thing, is like, where is the discussion happening? And so, for example, if you have an example of a brand which is running what it thinks is community just through content creator sponsorship, for example, and you can see that that really falls short, especially as TikTok takes over, etc. And the reality is the content creator actually has the power. So up until recently, you would have brands who were just looking for content creators to create content around them. They would give them sort of 10% of sales, of net sales, and that would be the deal, basically. And the brand would still own everything, really. It would own the messaging, it would own the product, it would own the timing, it would talk about the tone of the message, it would decide who the content creator was, etc. So the brand was very much in control of that. And now it's really shifted in terms of, you have content creators who have more audiences than any media outlet could possibly ever imagine. The power is sitting very much in the content creator, and they decide how they're going to work with brands, how they're going to talk about products, what the messaging is going to be around it as well, etc. So it becomes this very, very different thing. Like, the content creator isn't really a kind of just a marketing message distributor. It's actually a whole kind of brand creator, retailer, etc. And unless that's really being built into how you think about your whole business, it's very difficult to see how you can really make the most of that. And so there's brands that I know, for example, who are more kind of niche brands, who can build almost their whole business around connection with some great niche content creators. And they'll really step into that. Like, that will be their business. And those people will become not just marketing partners, but brand partners, commercial partners. They'll have deep commercial deals with them, etc. as well. So you end up in this situation where the business itself has to start thinking about almost that they're sharing commercial opportunities with significant commercial opportunities with key content creators as well. And that then starts changing your business model and changing your finance structures as well. And so I think there's probably two places the conversation's happening. One is within marketing teams, and I think that's what ends up being very challenging. And one that it's happening in a wider way around the business, and that's far more successful, I think, for now.
Wow. I love to hear about those dynamics and where they're going. And what do you think, now if we peek into the future a bit more, we talk about audiences and the reach of those creators versus brands versus media, where do you see the role of really owning audiences and having a direct relationship with audiences going forward?
Yes, I think this is the really big question about how does this progress? Because the reality is already the content creators have the audience, and they not just have the audience in terms of numbers, because some brands have some great numbers on their different socials and their different communities, etc. But what the real difference is, which I think is very difficult to understand or we probably accept, is that the content creators have the deep relationship with their community. And they not only have that relationship, they have their eyes, because they are creating huge amounts of content all the time. So they become maybe your favorite content creator, you're watching them for an hour a day, for example. And that's incredible in terms of the audience that they would have. And not only that, but they're like deeply, deeply influencing across sector. So your favorite content creator will be influencing what your house looks like, what you wear, what you're doing with your leisure time, where you're going on holiday, etc. So you end up with this really interesting thing where for multiple sectors, they're trying to work with the same content creator as well, which I think is really interesting. When I work across different sectors, they'll be talking about the same thing. Content creation is like a core aspect, and how they work with, they call it content creation, but what they mean is like the brand and distribution and marketing, etc., all these things. But what they're meaning is, because of the change on the power of content creation, this has become the main way that they drive brand awareness and marketing and sales, essentially, as well. So for me, what I think will be interesting is definitely how it works going forward with content creation. And it can have significant impact, because brands will have to start changing everything about how they work because of that. And then also, how do brands try and have some proprietary way of building up these strategies? And you can see that some of the brands have managed to make make that work a little bit more than others. And they've kind of really been able to focus in on the how do you work, how do you create great content, how do you create connection, how do you get people to share your content, etc. How do you show some level of brand within the content as well, so you don't kind of get lost in just whatever the viral trend is now as well. But it's going to be really difficult and it's going to be challenging. I saw a stat just this week on key viral moments within society. You know, those moments that everyone's talking about one day. They have a shelf life of around 12 days now. So even if you've got like the whole world talking about something, they're not going to be talking about it for very long. And so it is very challenging, but I think it's exciting. It's definitely a next wave of transition within any kind of consumer facing sector. And it'll be really exciting to see how it evolves.
And with this in mind, with those like short-lived moments and even audiences, so even across social media platforms, what we see when we talk to creators and brands is that they're really getting less reach, even though the numbers might be huge, but actually that they're reaching less of those people because they don't own that interaction. How important do you see really proprietary data and spaces where people can really directly connect with each other? Do you see a room for that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the future is never very predictable, but the predictability of it is the pendulum swings back and forth, right? So you end up with this kind of mass audiences and mega creators, and then that actually does naturally open up the opportunity for niche scenarios and niche audiences as well. And so I do think, without doubt, there is that opportunity to have like a really focused community, brand community, maybe if you make it kind of wide enough, the content wide enough as well. So without doubt, I think where it gets up to that kind of really mass, and as you say, like mega audiences, but numbers are starting to go down. What does that mean? Can the model sustain itself? Can it get any bigger? And then what it actually does is open up the next opportunity, which is probably, you know, the opposite of where we are at the moment, which is the brand-led, maybe curated, niche, kind of slightly more specialized communities as well, which is really interesting.
That is interesting. And I wanted to close off with the last question actually on this topic, which I think leads to an interesting answer, which is, what would you pick between two things? Either say you're a brand and you could have another 100,000 social media followers on your favorite social media versus 1,000 super fans that you have a direct relationship with and are engaged and you know things about them. Which one would you pick and why?
Easy. Always
Easy?
Super fans. Always the super fans. You know, what is brand building? Brand building is like building something that really speaks to not like a superficial version of people's interests and values, but like a much deeper version. As I say, like where Topshop really worked was it built into this need and desire of young girls at that time to be able to have something really that was theirs, a brand that was theirs. It's a deeper understanding of people's wants and needs and values. And so I think, having worked in research and done lots of that kind of work, I think where the value of a business and a brand is like connecting into like a really deeper need of a consumer, and you get that by the 1,000 super fans without doubt.
Great, very clear answer. Love it. Thank you for this. And for everybody listening, Carol, thank you so much, really, for sharing all the insights on this huge experiences you've had over the years. And where do people find you? And also maybe you can share a little bit more what you're working on, how you like to work with people.
Perfect. Yes, thank you so much. Yeah, you can find us at StudioThree.uk or LinkedIn. Find me on LinkedIn. Please connect with me. We'd love to speak to you all. And we are excited about working with either technical companies, fashion companies, beauty companies. We can help inject real growth understanding and growth strategy for you, which can help you obviously grow your business, but also engage with great investors as well. We have a great investor network as well that are looking for incredible pipeline as well. So yes, do connect with me and it'd be great to chat.
Amazing. And we'll share the links in the comments as well. Carol, again, thank you so much for the conversation. This was incredible. And tune in for the next time. Thanks so much.
Thank you.